Colorado is home to El Paso County. There are about 500,000 residents in the region, and the El Paso County Sheriff's Office is in charge of ensuring their safety. That doesn't mean, though, that its police officers can't occasionally let their hair down. Welcome to USA Stories Channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. Deputy Tony Schur was one of the department's longest-serving officials in 2016. He'd worked for the Transport and Court Departments, the Traffic Unit, and the Unit during his 29-year career, but he was set to retire. Schur was a highly appreciated employee of the Sheriff's Office because of his dedication to his career. In actuality, he was admired by a large number of his co-workers. According to a post on the department's Facebook page, Tony has gained the reputation of being extremely professional and informed from his colleagues and supervisors. The Sheriff's Office elevators had been breaking down at the same time Schur was retiring. To find out what was happening, a group of experts installed a security camera in one of them, but none would have predicted what the camera would capture. Schur entered the disputed elevator while the camera was rolling, ostensibly without realizing that it was being filmed. Before putting his phone in his pocket, he checked it. There was nothing unusual about the situation at this moment, but the elevator started to play music at that same time. Unexpectedly, this song was Watch Me, Whip Nay Nay, a 2015 smash, and things were going to become more crazier. When the music started, Schur flung his arms over his head and started performing a crazy set of stunts. He also gave off the impression that he was familiar with the entire song, so he was able to lip-sync to the rapping while brandishing the whip and doing the nay nay. However, Schur was hardly settling in when another policeman came via the elevator. Deputy Reed first only gave her comrade a nervous glance, but apparently his excitement was contagious, since after a short while she couldn't resist joining in on the dancing. She and Schur navigated the elevator together. The two then performed the stanky leg, one of the song's characteristic motions, like genuine pros. Nevertheless, Chief Deputy Evans's entry into the elevator brought the celebration to an abrupt halt. At this time, Schur and Reed stood with their backs to the wall and were still. In recognition of Evans' senior status, Schur even tossed him a salute. But the dance started up again as soon as Evans got out of the elevator. Then a third cop joined Schur and Reed while they were swaying about, and she too rapidly became comfortable with the situation. As they swayed back and forth to perform the Superman pose, the three of them quickly synced their movements. But there was still enough for one more, and that was when Sheriff Bill Elder came up the elevator. The three police officers paused for a while, perhaps worried about their boss's response. But when the sheriff performed his own maneuvers, the others did the same right away. The four officers concluded the thrilling 2.5-minute movie by joyfully jigging together. The El Paso County Sheriff's Office decided to upload the funny performance to its Facebook page after it concluded. Although it felt the film was a worthy homage to Schur and his civic service, none saw the clip's viral rise to fame. Still, 7 million people have watched the video since the Sheriff's Office shared it on social media in January 2016. The policemen involved were commended by many for demonstrating a more human aspect to law enforcement. In 2016, a Facebook fan said, "I've watched this about 30 times and it's absolutely hilarious." Considering how hard their professions are, it's good to see police having fun. Throughout the many years I worked for a West Virginia Sheriff's Department, we never had a sheriff who liked to get into arguments with his staff. We just thought, hey, let's celebrate his retirement, El Paso County Sheriff's Office Media Relations Manager Jacqueline Kirby said. Overall, the response was far greater than anticipated, particularly for a law enforcement organization. The intended effect of the video was definitely achieved. What we hope people see is that even though officers serve and protect as their main duty, they are human, Kirby said. They can have fun, and that's what we did. Deputy Schur seemed to have been aware of the prank the entire time. "Tony's probably one of the most hilarious, nicest deputies I've ever met," said Kirby. "He's had an incredible career and will be sadly missed." Simply said, a wonderful person and deputy. Schur retired after his well-known pranks on elevators. Therefore, it's safe to conclude that the El Paso County Sheriff's Office will miss his large personality. This sewer worker thought the process of clearing an obstruction in the sewer would be easy and usual. He frequently cleared up sewage obstructions, which occurred on a regular basis. However, he quickly became pallid after draining the water and discovering this obstruction. Durer was employed by a major sewer draining company in the community. To find out what was causing this, his boss sent Stewart down into the sewers by himself. Approximately once a month, they descended into the subterranean pipe system of the metropolis. The source of the barrier became apparent when Stewart descended farther. There was a greater accumulation of water and other liquids than he had ever seen. "What the hell?" he murmured to himself as he hurried back to his truck, not realizing that by using the extraction hose he had packed, he would be able to remove all of the additional water. Slowly but surely, the source of the obstruction revealed itself as the water level fell. One of the major tubes was clogged by a large greenish obstruction. As he worked to lower the water level as soon as possible, Stewart stared at the thing in complete amazement. But for some reason, the massive object appeared familiar. It was an expandable, inflatable device for fixing sewage pipe breaks. During necessary repairs, the pressure exerted on the tunnel walls would avoid collapses. However, there was a major issue with this discovery. Their database showed that no scheduled repair had been ordered anywhere, and there was not a single inflating device in use throughout the whole town. Stewart became increasingly dubious as he considered the situation further, since it was not adding up. What would happen if this specific expansion unit wasn't meant to hold up damaged pipes? What if it was intended to keep out water, and maybe even unwelcome individuals? Stewart's anxiety became even more as he considered this. Stewart's appeal for assistance fascinated and astonished the phone operator, who agreed right once that this needed to be looked into. He would dispatch the 3 closest cops to find Stewart. When Stewart got to his pickup, Officers Stevens, Waddle, and Santiago were there waiting for him. Without hesitation, the sewer worker instructed the cops to follow him. Despite Stewart's explanation of the situation as he led them down, the cops were taken aback by the reason for the obstruction and launched an inquiry right away. The police quickly came to the conclusion that this was an unusual case. This was obviously put here for a purpose by someone. Officer Stevens, whose name was Tricia, stated, "We ought to attempt to remove it. I can only see one motive for someone to erect several barricades." Tricia stated resolutely, "We need to figure out what's going on and who's behind this," and the other police concurred. As quickly as they could, the crew took down the inflatable barrier and entered the sewage system. They soon encountered another barrier, just as they had anticipated. The water pressure behind the obstruction was extremely low, according to Stewart's measurement. They were positioned at intersections, but they kept running into barriers. The gang decided that following the open pipes and seeing where they lead was the wisest course of action. The cops attempted to locate the source of the noise, but they were unable to do so since the pipes mirrored it. The group abruptly stopped as they rounded the corner, staring at the amazing scene in front of them. Abruptly, the sewage pipe opened out into a huge, roomy cavern. However, that wasn't the unexpected aspect. Since they had to traverse the room to get to the manhole, Stewart was aware of its existence. What was shocking was that he and the cops were looking into a room full of fancy equipment. Stewart said in a whisper, "This wasn't here before," pointing out the obvious. With cautious hesitancy, the group made their way into the room. This person was drawing electricity from the structures above ground. Standing in front of a tower of monitors, Stewart indicated where the sounds were coming from. Who would do this and why? The cops got to work right away seeking explanations. Officer Waddle suddenly yelled, "Look at this!" after a few minutes. Before long, the whole gang had gathered around Waddle's desk. A little screen showed video of the city, but no one seemed to notice it as they examined the files and paperwork that were out in the open. "This is a very amazing finding. We must immediately contact for backup," she stated. Thanks to all the wire collected here, she was relieved to get a signal when she grabbed her portable phone. However, she was unable to transmit a message before the gang heard footsteps coming rapidly. Stewart hoped that the 7 individuals who had entered the room had not been heard or seen. One of the people shouted up out of the blue, shocking the sewer worker. The individual questioned, "Is the path ready?" "Yes, it should be, but let me double-check," a second individual said. After that remark, Stewart could sense Tricia becoming tense, and the employee understood why. It would be awful for the gang to find out that they had taken down 2 blockades. Nobody was claiming that the group was full or that more were still on their way. If nothing else, they had to wait for the one who had just departed to come back. Nevertheless, there was no way the cops could talk to each other without the public listening. Thoughts of a way out ran through Stewart's thoughts, but he was distracted by the group's chatter. They spoke about their strategy and which banks and diamond stores would be the best for them. As they talked about jewelry stores and banks, it was obvious that these folks were preparing to commit some crimes. One of them abruptly interrupted to say that they had to finish before discussing the final plan. "Just wait a moment for Roger to return," someone said. All Tricia needed to hear was that. Stewart was astonished to hear Tricia's voice when the gang of crooks congregated at the same location. She cried, "Now!" as she abruptly emerged from cover and motioned for the other police to follow. Beside her, they materialized, and together they went up to the offenders and ordered them to submit and keep their cool. Stewart's wide eyes gazed at the sight. Although there were more criminals than police, the policemen were well prepared and had the element of surprise on their side, which made him extremely anxious. The crooks soon recognized that giving up was the wisest course of action. Even if every culprit was apprehended and given a prison sentence, the tale would make national headlines. Following the make of the arrests, after completing their investigation, the authorities discovered the precise plans the perpetrators had in mind. The trial was heavily covered by the media. The group intended to use the sewage system to loot banks and jewelry stores around the city at the same time. That would allow them to travel across the city fast and covertly. Fortunately, Stewart and the police officers who were first on the scene foiled the crooks' intentions. They succeeded in securing the safety of the city, thanks to their cooperation and gut feeling that something significant was going on. They received a Medal of Honor from the mayor's office for that accomplishment. Stepp had just finished clearing out his yard when he discovered an old wristwatch buried a long way below the surface of the ground. Under the heavy coating of hardened dirt and sludge, was there an ancient Rolex buried away? Stephen paused. Was it better to throw the crumbling, filthy fragment in the garbage and go on? Or had he really struck it lucky and discovered a genuine treasure? For the past 5 minutes, the jeweler had been studying the watch in silence. Stepp's enthusiasm and nervousness were getting the better of him. He hoped the jeweler would give him a price, an amount that would indicate if he had made a mistake or struck it lucky. For once in his life, Stephen longed for some good fortune, but optimism vanished as soon as he saw the jeweler's look. The jeweler tried to reply to Stephen with a stutter, but she was at a loss for words. Stephen reasoned that the jeweler was probably reluctant to declare the watch useless. When Stephen dug up his garden this afternoon, he never expected to discover anything. He expected to dig up stones and old roots, but not an antiquated clock. The watch was a happy accident. It looked nothing like a treasure, covered in a thick layer of filth. Instead, it looked like a bit of garbage. Since he had never lost a watch before, he was positive it wasn't his own. In addition, the watch appeared to have been buried here for a long time, even though he and his wife had only moved into this house a short while before. Stephen's first reaction was to give it a quick wash under the faucet in the hopes of finding a mark or other distinguishable characteristic. However, his wife talked him out of it the moment he brought up the notion. She'd never heard something so ridiculous before. Stephen thought this watch was unique, though. It had a narrative to tell, even though he was unable to put it into words. After talking it over, Stephen and his wife decided that taking the risk was acceptable. They thought the watch may be a bonus for when they retired, and if all went well, they might give some of the money to their cherished grandkids. Over the phone, Stephen confirmed the watch cleaning appointment, expecting that in 2 days it will appear brand new. Upon presenting the watch to the watchmaker, the specialist was genuinely taken aback, yet composed. The cleaner had rarely seen a watch in such a dismal shape, and this one was particularly bad. Much to everyone's relief, the watch turned out to be in rather good condition despite the difficulty in getting rid of the dirt. Still, not every component of the watch remained whole. Stephen had hoped that the watchmaker might determine the watch's worth by looking at its model or brand. Though he secretly hoped it was a Rolex or something, that was sadly not the case. The cleaner had never seen a watch like this one before and was unable to locate any brand marks on it. He even did an internet search, but to no avail. The cleaner's discoveries really upset Stephen, yet all of a sudden, disappointment gave way to enthusiasm. The watch was no longer merely a chance find in the garden once the cleaning was been finished. It had become a genuine investment after the expensive cleaning. But would this be a wise investment? It felt right, Stephen thought. Usually a watch's brand would tell us how much it was worth, but might an ancient watch that nobody knew about still be worth something? Had Stephen gotten it cleaned, which had been a terrible mistake? Stephen made the decision to take the watch to the jeweler he had called over the phone out of concern that his wife may be dissatisfied. This jeweler, he felt sure, was a master in his trade. Compared to the cleaner, there was a considerably greater likelihood that the specialist would recognize the watch. Stephen might be able to turn a profit on this unique watch. He had already paid an astounding €250 for the cleaning alone thus far. Stephen was shocked to see the store empty when he eventually made it there, perplexed by the time he pulled out his phone with haste. He discovered his wife had missed a call when he was unlocking it. Did she know more, or was she merely checking in on the status quo? The jeweler is phoning. As Stephen starts to wonder how the jeweler obtained his number, fear sets in. He inhales deeply before answering the phone. Stephen is asked by the jeweler if he has visited his business. Stephen pauses, questioning whether he made a mistake or possibly broke anything. Why is he being called by the jeweler? Stephen fears that the jeweler may be aware of his visit. The jeweler probes Stephen extensively, seeking to know what he saw, why he was there, and lastly, why he snapped a picture of the framed image. Overwhelmed by all the inquiries, Stephen attempts to leave the jeweler quickly. Why didn't he simply bring it up in the shop? Stephen attempts to put everything together, but nothing seems to fit. Thus, he chooses to go for a stroll. Stephen is walking along the sidewalk thinking about the watch. Stephen turns around as he hears a familiar voice shout his name. The jeweler is standing on the pavement, requesting to speak with you. That isn't precisely what Stephen had anticipated. The jeweler urged Stephen to come by his store around the corner, telling him he had some fascinating information concerning his watch. He pointed out to Stephen that he had visited there the day before, and he had gone to get coffee, so they had only missed each other by a few minutes. Stepp eventually consented in the hopes of learning something new. The jeweler started closely inspecting the watch as soon as Stephen gave it to him to look over. He made a comparison between it and the watch on the framed picture Stephen had discovered in his yard. The jeweler stared at Stephen for a few minutes before saying, "Considering the value of this watch, I'd like to offer you to keep it in my safe for the time being." Stephen made the decision to heed the jeweler's counsel, believing that he would probably also sell the watch, but as evidence, he asked for a receipt. Stephen rushed home and looked for his wife as soon as he had the receipt firmly in his pocket. He took a seat next to her and related what he had discussed with the jeweler. Stephen was still unable to respond to his wife's inquiry about the watch's value, albeit she was the one who asked it most. Stephen's wife was even more persuaded of the watch's worth after learning of everything. With confidence and joy, she questioned, "Darling, doesn't the jeweler's behavior indicate that the watch is truly something special?" Though Stephen wasn't sure what to do next, he couldn't disagree. He made the decision to detach himself from the watch for the time being, but he also made sure he remembered what was his. Stephen chose to give the jeweler a call. To be ready for the call, he and his spouse drafted a list of requirements, but he was taken aback when he heard who was on the other end of the call. The caller was obviously not the jeweler he had been spoken with. Stephen inquired, "Who are you?" After posing his query again, Stephen eventually received a response after first receiving none. The individual on the phone turned out to be a police SWAT squad member who was raiding the jeweler's business at the time. Stephen was stunned. He had no energy to demand an answer. He was utterly perplexed. There was still more to say from the SWAT officer. He clarified that Stephen needed to demonstrate that he had found the watch in his garden. Stephen began to regret the watch as he gazed at the just-planted salad bed. It dawned on Stephen that there was no getting out of his current situation. Furthermore, he was aware that proving his ownership of the watch would not be difficult. He had nothing to conceal, after all. He extended an invitation to the SWAT squad to visit his garden, where they could see the obvious signs of his digging. Stephen didn't anticipate, though, that the cops would come up to him right away. A few minutes later, Stephen's home was parked in front of other automobiles. The SWAT squad ignored Stephen and his wife and charged into the garden without pausing, who by then had returned home. While checking sure no one else entered the area, the cops cautiously collected mud samples from several locations across the garden. Stephen was forced to see the police's actions via the kitchen window. He saw someone putting a watch in a container to protect it from harm not long after the SWAT squad arrived. But it was obvious from the cops' grim expressions that Stephen's future was in jeopardy. Meanwhile, Stephen and his spouse were questioned in depth by two police officials. The majority of the inquiries concerned their home and landscaping. They were questioned about the length of time they had lived in this home and the modifications they had made to their garden over time. Stephen was baffled as to how the watch was involved in any of this. Photographers and videographers gathered in front of the house, stifled by police tape, to get images and recordings of the SWAT teams working in his garden. It was the jeweler, at last, that Stephen recognized. It took some time for him to be allowed entry inside the residence by the police. An official from the State Museum accompanied the jeweler. At last, the truth about the watch surfaced. It had originally belonged to a local tyrant who had long since died away. They even revealed that the watch belonged to the dictator and that he was wearing it when he passed away. Stephen and his spouse were overjoyed to learn that their finding would still provide some financial benefits despite all the costs, excitement, and bother. They were unsure about the watch's precise value, though. With great pleasure, the museum official disclosed the amount the museum was ready to pay, a staggering $35,000. With beaming smiles, Stephen and his spouse hugged and made plans for a little getaway. Danny follows the girl home since he doesn't know why the bus driver lets her ride longer than other girls. He recalled the day when he shook his head as he observed her long, gorgeous curls. He took out the clippers and shaved it all off in one determined motion. With her short crew cut, his daughter thought she looked like a guy, but he truly didn't have an option. He reasoned that at least that one issue had been resolved. In Utah, Philip Harry resides with his daughter, age 11. He departs early for work every morning, but he always trusted Isabella to get ready for school and ride the bus by herself, and had up to this point. He was unconcerned when he saw the first tardy slip in her school bag, but he started to worry when she got a second and third warning in a span of 2 weeks. Isabella had been raised in a loving home and had experienced a really happy childhood. Though they hadn't had much money, Philip always went above and above to make sure Isabella had all she required. Patricia, his wife, would always reassure him that they will manage. He had no idea that life had different ideas. Patricia was diagnosed when Isabella was 3 years old, and she tragically died 6 years later. Despite his devastation, Philip didn't give up. He bowed his head and made up his mind to support his daughter. However, Isabella had to deal with the implications of having no one to assist her with getting ready for school in the morning and drive her there. Now that she was motherless, Isabella needed to develop her independence. She got ready for school early every morning and rode the bus by herself. Though difficult, they succeeded. Years went by, yet Philip missed something significant because he lacked the knowledge and the time. Isabella started receiving notifications from the school for arriving late each morning. After a demanding workday, Philip tried to talk to Isabella one evening to find out what was going on, but she snapped at him and tried to divert the conversation. She didn't want the truth to do her father any harm. Philip started to become skeptical at that point. Philip told his supervisor one day that he would be leaving work early. Then he pulled up to the corner to see if his daughter was indeed riding that bus every day, just as she was supposed to leave the school and board it. As expected, he saw her right away. She boarded the bus promptly, along with several of her pals. All the way home, he rode the bus, but suddenly he observed something. Philip was aware that Isabella was going through a trying time. She hadn't been the same since his wife died, and who could blame her? At the time, she had just been 9 years old. However, she had recently changed significantly in behavior, and Philip was determined to find out why. Philip sat Isabella down again the next evening. He approached the topic tactfully, initially, by inquiring about Isabella's difficulty falling asleep at night. Was this the cause of her tardiness to school? Did she sleep too much? Isabella gave a headshake, but he watched the astonishment light up her eyes when he eventually questioned her about the bus driver. Isabella was asked by Philip why she was being kept on the bus longer than the other children. Could it be the reason for her daily tardiness to school? Then Isabella told him everything, opening up to him. Even after all the other kids got off, the bus driver had been leaving her on the bus in the morning and evening. When she revealed that it was because of her hair, Philip was astounded. Was something wrong with her? Isabella had trouble with her hair every morning after her mother died. Her father was not surprised by this discovery. He knew exactly what the issue was. Isabella had really had several blowouts with her father about her hair. Ultimately, the helpless father believed he had to turn to extreme methods to control it. Despite his best efforts, Philip was unable to detangle Isabella's hair. If I pulled her hair, she would become upset with me. He said, "I didn't know how to do it," in an interview. At that point, he realized he had no other alternatives. He shaved it all off, grabbing the clippers he used to keep his own haircut. Isabella was appalled to see what he had done after examining her short hair in the mirror, but she didn't want to annoy her father. She was aware of his best efforts. Regrowing out took 2 years. Isabella refused to shave it again when her father recommended it. They then decided on a middle ground. Rather than shave Isabella's hair once more, Philip grabbed a pair of scissors and chopped off half of its length. However, this didn't fix the problem, and Isabella's hair quickly became matted and disheveled once more. All she could do was try to cover it by tying it up until the day the bus driver became aware of it. Tracy Dean cherished both her career and her family. She knew she had to intervene as soon as she noticed Isabella was having trouble. She assumed her dad didn't know how to arrange Isabella's hair because she noticed that it had been trimmed the previous evening. She pulled a hairstyling bag from her purse and requested her to wait behind on the bus. Isabella and Tracy started having regular hairstyling appointments soon after. Every morning, Tracy would comb Isabella's hair and style it into a French braid. She was obviously having trouble with her hair. Sometimes she simply wants one braid, but we normally make 2 French braids first, Tracy acknowledged in an interview. Why, though, did she do it? It went slowly at first. Tracy had to do 10-minute sessions for a whole week in order to gradually untangle Isabella's hair. On those days, she had been a little late for school, but Tracy understood why it mattered. One of her 4 homegrown children is almost Isabella's age. However, Tracy was unable to contain herself when Isabella started talking about her mother. Tracy broke down in tears when she learned about Isabella's mother. Isabella was perplexed at first, but she understood when Tracy disclosed some information about her history. Like Isabella's mother, Tracy had also battled cancer. She was thankful that she could still be present for her kids and acknowledged that she was fortunate to have survived. "My children and spouse weren't the only reasons I lived." In an interview, Tracy said, "I survived for these kids on the bus who need somebody to talk to or do their hair or whatever." Isabella learned how to brush her hair from me as well. When she got on the bus, she would ask, "Does my brushed hair look good?" I'll remark, "You did fantastic." Philip was obviously shocked to learn about Tracy and Isabella's daily ritual. At first, Isabella didn't want to offend him. He had done his best, after all, to disentangle her hair. However, Philip's gratitude ended with Tracy. Isabella once returned home looking stunning. She looks the part for the princess that I refer to her as. I've been intending that she act the part, and her confidence has increased significantly, Philip said. As soon as the touching tale reached the public, Tracy was praised as a hero. She is still modest, though. It's just the way my mother brought me up, to be kind to everyone, especially those who are in need of some love. Even the mischievous youngsters deserve a chance, in my opinion. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.